Hello, everyone, and welcome to another American Scouser podcast, our player ratings video for Liverpool versus Newcastle. Bickler, what's happening? You got the tank top thing going. This is like the daytime Bickler we're seeing here.
It's beautiful out. I got in late last night, watched the first half in bed, rolled out to the pub for the second half. So, yeah, I'm just barely here.
I'll be honest, I set up the alarm, and then I suddenly woke up, and it felt like it was way later. But you know, like how you wake up, you're like, holy shit, I'm late. So I had that wake up. So I was bright awake at like 20 minutes before kickoff. And then I saw the lineup, and it really freaking woke me up. What do you think of that starting 11?
Yeah, so it was nerve-wracking to see that much rotation, I think, with the players. But, I mean, the work spoke for itself today, and I think you got to say he got it right for the most part. So
I think so too. I think any parts, I mean, we'll get into the specifics now, but I think any part that we were maybe slightly worried about or scared of kind of ended up paying off. And now looking back, it looks like, man, this kind of worked out great. So let's get to the ratings right away. Start with the guy in goal, Alisson. What do you make of him?
I thought he was an 8. I thought his distribution was good today. I thought he didn't dwell on the ball a whole lot, and he made some great one-on-one stops, whether they were onside or offside.
Yeah, I have met an 8 as well. And especially like what you said in the distribution part of things, I think anytime we were able to kind of pass the ball around and go through alley, kind of like, like the pass back and forth with Van Dijk and Matip, we could break that press very easily. It kind of scares me, I guess, for their City game as well, but maybe they'll do a fumble that we did, and I thought we did extremely well over there. So your favorite guy at right back, Gomez, what do you have for him?
Wow, man, he had a game. I had him at an 8.5. I thought he was great. I thought he was one of our biggest pieces offensively, too. Like, I thought he was doing everything good that came up the right side, came through him. Fantastic ball that Sadio Mane should have probably put away second half. Yeah, I mean, and he held his own defensively against some tricky players. I have my own feelings on Saint-Maximilian, but I thought he did well overall. Yeah, I had him at 8.5.
Saint-Maximilian reminds me of guys who play clubs in FIFA where it's just like pass the goddamn ball. Like, yes, you're good, but pass the goddamn ball kind of thing. I had him at an 8. I thought Gomez did really well. And I think like very physical, very good defensively. I mean, with him, you figure you kind of gain some defense, but maybe give up in the offense compared to Trent. I thought we did pretty well done. Jamie says he'll take credit for the heart attack. 1-0 from my prediction Thursday night pod. Yeah, I was not too happy about the prediction at that time either, but I thought it went well overall despite some nerves. Joel Matip, I have him at a 7.5. I thought it was good. Like I say, going back to that build-up, I thought we did really well back there. I'm extremely pleased with defense. Obviously, the clean sheet. What do you have him at?
I have him at an 8. I think I have all my defenders pretty high this week just because, I mean, we're on this run of clean sheets, and they probably don't get enough credit for it, especially against a front three that I think has been in pretty good form. I think they did a really good job of pressing up high today, holding the line, and I think handled some tricky players. And I thought Montep, it did what he does, and he contributed a little bit more offensively today as well. I have him at 8.
So you got the partner Van Dijk at 8 as well?
I do. Yep, I have him at 8 as well.
Yeah, 8 is fair, I think. Yeah, and you're right. I think defensively we were very solid, and it's kind of sometimes gets overlooked. It looks like Newcastle doesn't have a lot going forward, but that's partially because of our defense as well. How about Robo on the left-hand side?
I had him at an 8, and I think the difference between him and Gomez today was that just he does so much work, but that final ball, that final last piece just has not been there consistently. And it wasn't there today at all either. But, I mean, he did great defensively and obviously causes issues with his work rate down that left side. I had him at an 8.
By the way, James says he didn't know that you had the open carry license for the guns. But, yeah, the guns we don't usually see in the evening podcast, which look forward to more evening podcasts.
I only do this pod because we're so body positive. Thank God.
Defense. I mean, midfield. I'm sorry.
That's distracting,
Hendo, I thought he was. I thought he did really well for that position. I have him at a 7.5. Everything good in terms of like how fast the ball moves and getting everybody else going. The biggest fear I think we all had in this game was that we kind of like it takes a while to get into these early games and we don't show a lot of energy. I think we didn't have that today because we had Hendo and Milner on the field kicking some ass. So I have him at 7.5.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up Milner because this is probably the only time that I can remember in recent memory where those two in midfield I thought actually did really well together and made sense because it almost freed up Keita to play almost like a free run midfield, which I thought was needed and really where he excels the most because you had two grinders in there and that freed him up. I had Hendo at a 7.5. I thought he did extremely well in that role. Hits the long ball over the top, the deep diagonals too from that position that I think are important. Yeah, I had him a 7.5 today.
I have Milner in a 7.5 as well. Maybe it's kind of like a curve that you get towards Milner, maybe like the expectations and stuff. I was slightly worried in terms of like pace and being able to keep up, but the dude is a machine. And I think that energy in midfield is what kind of helped us, especially in the first half, kind of dominate possession and control the game, especially for like an early game. So I have him at a 7.5.
Yeah, no, and I think that's the thing about Milner, right? Like, how do we evaluate Milner? Are we evaluating him on what we normally expect out of the midfield, or what we expect based on his age and where he's at in his career? And I actually thought like 7.5, I think is perfectly fair. I think the surprising statistic to me after the game was that he was responsible for the most key passes in the match. And he was involved in almost a dozen duels, 50-50s. So like he was involved throughout in a way. You know, he gets that challenge that's like we're looking at whether it's a pen or not, and he gets there first. Like I thought he did really well throughout, and I think 7.5 is perfectly fair for him.
Yeah, it looked like out of the midfields, obviously Keita, which we'll talk about next. Milner was taking a bit more of the chances in terms of like through balls between the lines, and Hendo was more about facilitating like switching wings and stuff like that, which, you know, he's really the best at in terms of fast movement of the ball. So my boy Nabi lad, what do you have for Keita?
8.5. You know, before the game, I think we were all concerned about that right side. We have three players that we don't favor in those positions between Gomez, Naby, and Diaz on that side. And like, it's interesting that our bright spots were Naby and Gomez to me. Like, I mean, I thought that Naby was phenomenal throughout. I mean, obviously we talk about the goal, but I think when I'm the most impressed with Naby is when he's doing those like sort of ball retention things that we came to love with Genie. Like when he's operating in tight space and controlling possession, that's when I'm most impressed about Naby. And he's a hard player to evaluate because we're sunk emotionally into how much we paid for him, how long we waited for him versus what we've gotten from him. But I think his highs are so incredibly high that it like makes it even more difficult, right? Like when he's at his best, it's so fucking cool to watch and so good. But I thought this was like the best of Naby in a way that didn't have necessarily those ridiculously huge highs. Like he didn't hit a 30-yard screamer. He did pull off like the pass of the century. But I thought he was quietly really, really important to the game today.
Yeah, I'm at an 8.5 as well. The half coming probably from the goal alone. But like I've talked in the past about how, well, when he's with Thiago, he fits more into that Genie role and he doesn't try to do those crazy passes and stuff like that. I think going back to what you were saying earlier, having Hendo and Milner do the heavy lifting enables them to kind of take a bit more of those chances and be on the ball a bit more with Thiago not there. So, yeah, I thought he did extremely well. Well-taken goal. A couple of times where you're like, man, you should have done that probably instead, like decision-making and stuff. But I think the amount of, like, his counter-pressing was excellent. I think overall that actually entire counter-pressing up top was impressive. So
it was a complete performance from him.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think normally we always say, it was creative but not as strong, or we say, it was great in counter pressing but not as creative. Yeah, it was a good mix we got for him today. Probably my man of the match as well. But we'll get to that at the very end. Let's go up to the top three. Diaz, who started on the right, then flopped over to the left. First off, what do you give him for a rating, and what do you say for the right Diaz and the left Diaz?
I think he was distinctly better on the left. However, that is tough to evaluate because that switch came right around the time that Mo comes on, right? And Mo obviously creates that space down the left side. There were acres of space on the left side once Mo came on, and I don't think that's a coincidence. So it's tough to evaluate. I had him at a 7.5 just because he plays touchline to touchline in sideline to sideline. And there's very few players that you can actually say that about. And he does it with so much grace and fluidity and has such a good first touch to beat a man off the dribble that he causes just absolute havoc. I thought the final ball wasn't there. At times he looked a little bit tired. I had him at a 7.5.
Yeah, I think that's the only thing that we're not getting from him yet is the final pass or the finishing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I think that will come over time. Partially, it's more of a he almost seems like he misses some of those because like he gets excited or something like that. He plays like a kid out there. But yeah, I gave him like say 8. I felt like if it wasn't for Nabi, he was probably his work rate is unbelievable.
Yeah,
like
unreal.
all over the place, kind of like tracking it back right away. And then yeah, you read about it like once, and we will get to the subs once more. Mane, what do you have for him?
I'm at a 6.5. You know, I mean, he did all the things that you need him to do from a work rate standpoint and from a pressing standpoint. Just missed a couple of sitters today. I mean, balls that he usually easily tucks away. But that's the thing with Mane, right? I mean, sometimes he just misses those, and it takes a while for him to get in. And then he'll have games like he did last week where he takes he creates goals and scores goals off one magical touch. So it seems to be one or the other with him. Today was just one of those ones where he just missed the chances that you expect a player of his caliber to put away.
Yeah, it's odd. Those where he's like wide open for the shot, he struggles. When you see him as kind of like, bouncing off, almost falling down, reaching out and stuff, he scores those. It is kind of like I have him at a 7, mainly due to the pressing. I thought the counter pressing and how we kind of like kept him going backwards constantly, and he was like a big part of that. Jota, what do you make of him? It was kind of like an odds.
Yeah. That's another tough one to evaluate. I had him at a 7.5. I like him much better centrally. I thought that's the place to play him. I thought that he did better second half in terms of just getting in dangerous spots. Like he's best when he's in the penalty box. When he's in the box with the ball at his feet in tight spaces, that's where he's at his best. I thought he took up some dangerous spots and it just didn't quite come off for him. But I think he kind of grew into that, especially late in the game, which was important because there was a period there before the substitutions when Newcastle looked like they were threatening to get a hold on that game. So 7.5 for Jota.
I'm at a 7. The only thing that I did not like from him today was some of the body language after not getting the ball or losing the ball and stuff like that. And he did wear down towards the end. So I almost do not see him like basically starting or like maybe coming off the bench on Tuesday or something like that. But he did wear down, and you could kind of tell our press wore down a little bit because of that as well. So we come to players off the bench. So first sub, obviously they came in together, Fab and Mo. And yeah, I mean, what days we're living in, man, like where we can just bring in Fab and Mo to close out a game. Let's start with Mo. What'd you make of him?
Yeah, those are hell of a subs. I had him at a 7. I mean, I thought he did well, right? I mean, for most standards, I thought he did well. He had a couple where, like, he has that one where he just has to beat the keeper and it doesn't quite settle for him and he can't get it onto his right. And then, yeah, he had opportunities. He had like 3 or 4 chances where he had opportunities where, like, if the ball falls right or it's his day, he kind of takes that on and wins it. But I think the one thing you can't argue about this performance is his impact on the actual match itself, because when he came on, it was starting to feel a lot more in the balance, and he definitely shifted that.
Yeah, that's why it's kind of hard to judge, because if you look at how he played in terms of, what he did, like he should probably easily finish that one that he's like, going at the goalie, kind of like takes too many touches and it gets awkward. But when he comes on the field, like you were saying earlier, that left-hand side just became wide open. You can kind of see how he attracts people and kind of puts fear. And what I like about him is he kind of can take advantage of that. Played a couple of really nice balls to the left wing, taking advantage of that space, because I think he knows it's going to eventually come back to him if he makes that down the right wing. But yeah, I think more than how he played, it was the impact of him being on the field. And again, defensively, I thought he did really well. Obviously, he had fresh legs, but he was constantly tracking back on that side, helping out Gomez. So I'm at a 7.5, mainly probably most on the impact than anything else. How about Fabinho?
I had him at a 6.5. I mean, he came in and he starts getting lumped right away. I mean, his physical in that midfield, they ran through the back of him twice with no calls, like within the first 5 minutes of the match of him being in. So he's probably like trying to figure out what's going on. But I thought he did a good job of just cleaning up possession in the mids, winning those 50-50s, getting it back in safe spaces and letting us recover and retain our shape. And then, that's what you want at that point of the game with him. And I thought he did that well.
Yeah, I have him at a 7 just because, that was the purpose of him coming in, kind of cleaning up fresh legs and stuff like that in midfield. I think as a player, because of how he plays, he's more of a control game than, like running around and pace game. So coming off the bench doesn't always serve him well, I think, compared to like the next guy we're going to talk about, Thiago. Whereas he can come off the bench because he's there to kind of more control the game, but in midfield, not a defensive role. So his energy, more than his energy rate, it is kind of like possession. So I think it helps Thiago a lot more. I had him at a 7.5. I thought he did exactly what he came in there for. What do you have for him?
I had him at a 7. I mean, it's hard for me to evaluate substitutes in general, but I think it's harder to evaluate these midfielders that like basically change tempo and pace of matches instead of just being instant impact, right? Like with Jota off the bench, Diaz off the bench, they go in, you can account for straight up chances that they're creating, right? In this midfield, it's more like they're restructuring shape and re-solidifying possession, which is harder to notice right away and harder to sort of evaluate. So for me, I had him at a 7 just because, he did that. Like he went in and he did what we want. Those are the 3 substitutions you want. You want the guy that creates enough of an impact up front, which it creates room for other people. And you want 2 midfielders that can retain possession and clean up in the midfield. And that's what those guys did. So, I had him at a 7.
So a big risk taken paid off, you think? Or, what did you think from the get-go? Did you think it was a huge risk initially?
I did. I thought it was a gamble. Based on Newcastle's form because right now they're the hardest fixture of our remaining fixtures. We figured to be Tottenham, but based on run of form, it's Newcastle right now. And I thought that what I was impressed with that the question marks were the bright spots for us. And we took away the fullbacks, which is what Howe at Newcastle. That's what Howe did with Bournemouth. They were a high-flying offense because they pushed those wings way up, and they weren't able to do that. And the fact that they weren't able to do that, and we didn't even have our best offensive player on the pitch. That speaks to the depth of this team, and I think it really spoke to like Klopp having faith in the system and the right players at the right time, and they proved us wrong.
And that was the thing, like he talks about, it was kind of like a put your money where your mouth is kind of a moment for me in terms of seeing that lineup. Because, obviously everybody says that, right? Like everybody in the squad matters. They got to be ready when you go. And then you see Milner starting. And obviously they were even talking about broadcast in terms of like players being professional. Nobody is more professional than that dude. But, that seems risky. Like Gomez, you probably did not see him playing in that role. I think we mostly expected to run these guys into the ground like Trent and stuff like that more than taking these chances. So it's kind of like his faith, and that's why you have a squad. And, we talked about it on the podcast before, how much confidence we have of managing a large squad. And it's risk maybe we don't like seeing, but it turned out to be a pretty smart risk at the end, and we get huge 3 points. You got any hopes from this afternoon for Leeds?
I got a lot of hopes. We'll see what happens. I'm hopeful all the time, but it'll be good. I think, listen, the thing you got to like about Leeds is they have the ability to play open, right? And the thing you got to love about City is that they have the ability to lay an egg at any given moment. And they do. They'll lay an egg out of nowhere. So it's just fingers crossed. We can only control the controllables, and that's the teams in front of us, and we're getting those points. So we just got to hope the dominoes fall where they may. And, I was talking at the pub today. It's like, look, if we lose the league by a point, will that be devastating? Yeah. But given the run that we've played, if we're able, like I just keep salivating at the opportunity that we will have knocked City out of a semi-cup final. If we get the Champions League final, it happens to be City, and we win in the Champions League final against City, but lose the league by a point, that's good enough for me. Like I think from a mental standpoint, that's a good takeaway. Like, yeah, we lost the league by a point, but we kept City from the CL, and we beat them in a head-to-head title game. So I've got hope either way. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, you know me, I'm just cautiously optimistic. I just almost like at this point, yeah, I mean, we all dream of the quad ideally, and that's what we want, and it's very within reach, and it seems doable, right? I mean, it's becoming more and more doable as we go. And I know everybody is like, well, one of them is not in our hands. I understand that, but still, we're still in the chase for it. I just hope, like, yeah, I mean, there should be at least two more trophies hopefully coming this team's way, just because they freaking deserve it, for God's sake. So I mean, these performances, these squad performances, I mean, today I consider it almost like a squad win, and kind of helps Tuesday with a short turnaround. So we'll see what happens there. Well, Bickler, we will see you Monday evening. Probably not in a tank top at that time, who knows? But then we will be with Gally kind of recapping this game and maybe celebrating how we're still on top after Leeds takes points away from City. Thank you, everybody, for listening. See you guys Monday night.